Okay, so the Makkot. Let's talk a little bit about the Makkot. There are many different ways of grouping the Makkot. Right? There's this notion that it's not just 10 Makkot randomly, but there are themes, there are sets. Now you probably all know, because this is the one that you always get taught, with Tzach Hadash B'Achav, and there's a lot to that, right? The Tzach Hadash B'Achav is dividing into 10, dividing into 3 groups. The first one focusing on like the water land level, and then at like the man level, right, affecting human beings, and then the heavens or something like that, right? They're all types of different divisions, and there's a lot of truth to that. There is an interesting one that's suggested by a lot of modern scholars, like more modern, not like 20th century, but like 19th century, which I think is interesting and worth thinking about, because it broadens where we think the Makkot start and end, and that is the 4 triad model. This was suggested by, again, people who are like on the cusp of like a little bit of shtickle maskilish, whatever, Shadal, his Talmidim Regio, Wesley, people like that. But I do think it's interesting. And they basically claim that you should look at the Makkot as a group of 12. The 10 Makkot plus the Tanin, which is explicitly God's first Mofet sent to Paro, and then create Yamsu for the end, which is clearly the end. What
was it Tanin?
The snake. The snake, right?
It's interesting that refers to Tanin in one place and then the Chash.
Yeah, there's all types of interesting things to do with that. But they come up with this interesting, there's one particular point I find fascinating, that's why I want to bring it up. Right, so they divide it in slightly different ways, but into 4 groups of 3. Right, Tanin Dam Tzvardea, Kinim Arav Dever, Barad Shchin Barad Arba, and then Choshech B'Chorot Yamsuf. Now that's there for 4 triads. Now, within that, right, they have a few interesting insights into the nature of the Makkot. I came across this from Al Torah, which I've mentioned before, but this they actually do. Their stuff on Mitzrayim is excellent. Their Haggadah. This year we're preparing for Pesach. If you go to their Haggadah section, they've divided like each of these topics in Tanakh. Each of them is like a 25, 30 pages of Makaros, and every little topic they have like 25, 30 topics of excellent material. So last year, this is what I used to for new stuff. So this was one of the insights that I hadn't seen before. So one thing that they note is that if you divide it into the triad, the interesting thing is that you get that each of these 4 sets, the first one is a warning, and the second 2 are Makkot, right? Which in the first triad is evident, right? The Tanin is not a punishment, right? It's just a warning sign for the next 2. And that's why N.H. Wesley explains that's why, if you notice, Moshe doesn't warn Paro for, obviously, the Tanin, or for Kinim, Shchin, or Choshech. There's no advanced warning like there are by the other Makkot. And his argument is because they were themselves warning shots, right? Like the structure is a quasi-Makkah / Mofet, which is a warning shot, and then if you don't listen, 2 punishments. And that's why, at the beginning of each of these triads, you don't get a warning. The second thing he notes is similar to what people say with Tzach Hadash B'Achav, but actually neither. Right? The Tzach Hadash B'Achav gets a little bit messy, right? People say, the Makkot were divided between like sea level, either land or water, and then like man level, and then heaven, right? That's the Tzach Hadash B'Achav. So he says, well, if you do it into 4, it's actually a bit neater, because you get water, because the Tanin is a sea serpent, right? It's like a sea creature, right? Tanin, Dam, Tzvardea is water. Then Kinim, right? Arov, Dever are on the land, right? Shchin, Arbe, Shchin, Barat, Arbe are air, right? Why? Because Shchin is...
It threw it up in the air.
It throws up the ashes, right, in the air, right? And then, obviously, Barad, right? And Arbe is the wind, right? The emphasis is the wind that brings them, right? And then, heaven, which is Bicharot, right? Sorry, which is Choshech, right? Where the heavens themselves are darkened. Bicharot, where the Malach, the Mashchit, comes down, right? And Yamsuf, which is like, that's a bit not as neat, correct? The first 3 work out much better, in a Hanami. Then he also suggests that the first triad destroy the fish of the Nile, the second all attack cattle, right? All attack like livestock. The third destroy agricultural, and the fourth kill human beings. That's actually very neat, right?
Yeah, Shrin is part of the third, I thought.
What? Shrin is no, it's the third.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's people. Shrin. Oh.
Part of the third.
Yeah, that one's less neat, right? Yes, correct. Again, none of these are perfectly neat, but the one thing about his that I really do like, that I think is very helpful, is what he notes is that if you divide it as a triad, the easiest way of marking the development of what's happening in the Makkot is by following the Chartumim. And this is the insight I wanted to bring because this I think is very, very clever. And he notes that if you divide it this way, right, then the role of the Chartumim map perfectly onto the groups of four. Because what happens in the first three?
So it's the finger of God.
No, first three. If you count the Tanin, they're able to do it, right? They can replicate the Tanin, they replicate Dam, they replicate Tzardeya, right? The whole first triad, the Chartumim, replicate. In the second set, right, what do?
Can't do it.
It's over, yeah.
Right? They can't replicate it, but where are they?
Still trying?
Yeah, they're still trying, they're still present. In the third, starting at Shchen, right, what does the pasuk say about them?
Pleading with Paro.
Because they can't stand anymore. Right? The Shchen, right, they can no longer stand. They were not able to be Omeid Lifnei Paro. Right? And then by the fourth one,
Never heard.
they're not present. Right? And what he notes is that if you think about the Makkot as an attack on the theology of the Egyptians, it makes sense that there's going to be a progression, that you're going to watch the representative of the Egyptian religion be affected in ascending order. Right? They're going to start off and they can contend with God. By the second one, they can't, but they're still trying, they're still vying, they're still present. Right? By the third one, they're on their knees. Right? They can't stand up. They're begging Paro to let him go. And by the fourth, when Hashem decides to actually, take out the big guns. Yeah, exactly. Right? They're gone. Right? There's nothing left. They're not. Right? You don't hear from them anymore. Right? And right, they died, or they just they're just gone. Right? They don't have any. Right? They can't say anything.
They quit.
Well, not all of them are firstborns, but the point is that they have no standing anymore, right? And this, I think, is the most interesting component of this, right? Because again, even if you don't buy the four triad exactly, right? His point that there are four distinct stages that you watch the representatives of the Egyptian religion slowly collapse, right? Slowly go from being able to contend with God, as it were, right? To trying but failing, to collapsing physically and just begging Paro to make it end, right? To Hashem winning, right? To them just being gone, right? Then it highlights in a very sharp way the extent to which the Makkot weren't just random, but they were an assault on Egyptian theology and a slow process education towards the knowledge of God, right? And I think realizing that the Chartumim, right, because we don't really focus on it, but the truth is, right, they seem to be ancillary to the story. But what he's noting is, no, they're actually very central to the story, right? Watching the way in which the priests of Egypt, right, slowly, right, bend their knees before God, right, they slowly collapse before God, is a very good way of marking the extent to which God's educational plan has been successful. Okay? Again, none of the divisions of the Makkot are perfect, but each of them does add a certain level of insight into what exactly the Makkot were trying to do. Right? They all have similarities in terms of it's hitting different realms. It but again, each of them does have a certain each of them has some insight to add in terms of what you should be looking for in the Makkot. So this is one of, I think, the key insights that I gained, at least from the four triad model. Like I said, there are other models, but maybe we'll talk about some on another day.